Now, I wonder, has an overdose of political correctness ushered in the populist wave? That's the subject, or thesis, perhaps, of a Channel 4 documentary tonight by Trevor Phillips, the former head of the Equality and Human Rights Commission. At its heart, it poses the question, by controlling language on race or gender, disability or the rest, are we changing the way people think or just suppressing what they really think? And has the gagging of certain phrases just unleashed an anger now emerging as this new popular fervour? Before we discuss this, a little taste. Here's a sense of that suppression. It's from a Newsnight film 6 months ago when Gabriel Gatehouse visited Youngstown in Ohio before the US presidential election.
You're not free to express your opinion, because you're a racist, you're a bigot, you're homophobic, or depending on whatever the topic is, you're no longer allowed to have an opinion.
Well, joining us now is one of the founders of the Women's Equalities Party, Catherine Mayer, who's also a new book out, Attack of the 50-Foot Women, How Gender Equality Can Save the World, and the Spectator columnist Helen Dale, a novelist as well. Thank you very, very much for joining us. I wonder if you take that on board, Catherine, that Liberals are now can be accused of shutting down debate with that insistence on political correctness.
It's a very familiar argument, but in the time that since I founded the Women's Equality Party and the time I've been writing the book, I've been examining the mechanisms, set them out in the book, that created the political situation we're in, and I can tell you that it's very easy to confuse cause and effect. Political correctness isn't the reason we are where we are. It is what you mean by that, the bundle of things called political correctness, is about a very divided world.
When you heard those chaps in the film just now saying we're not free to express our own opinions, they're not going to stop having those opinions, but they feel they can't use the language anymore. Is that the right direction or the wrong direction?
It's missing the point about what's going on. What's happened is a failure of mainstream politics. The reason that I actually came up with the idea of the party was that I had seen the way that mainstream parties responded to UKIP by contorting themselves into UKIP-like positions. And I thought, why don't we do the same thing for feminism? If we prove feminism is a vote winner, maybe the parties will also make themselves like that. Now, by doing that, by the parties taking on the coloration of populists, and not challenging it, they appeared to lose authenticity. In the search for authenticity, people often mistake people spouting misogyny and racism for truth tellers, whereas they're actually misogynists and racists.
Okay, so do you agree with that? There is not actually a link between the rise of political correctness and the rise of this populist
I think it's actually a bit more complicated than what people want a reason. Because people were so caught short by Brexit, by Trump, by the 2015 election here, by the results of elections in Australia where I used to work, people were so surprised. They want an explanation, and they want a nice, simple, monocausal explanation. Now, political correctness may be a part of it. I think going around and shutting people up is probably not a good thing. It's inimical to civil society. It doesn't help if people are excluded.
Can I just ask, when you hear that idea of shutting people up, does that tally with how you think of politically correct language working?
Obviously, there's been a whole debate around no platforming.
Yes.
If that's what
right.
You're talking about here, and a certain policing of language. Actually, some of that is valid only in the sense that that language is, as I was talking about, offensive. But I'm somebody who believes in free speech. I would rather not invite some of the people who get invited, but I wouldn't no platform them. That doesn't mean that the issues raised are not real ones.
I mean, it did really. One that comes to mind, because it was shortly after I arrived in the UK back from Australia, was Julie Bindel, who I disagree with on pretty much everything, but who is still a recognisable feminist in a recognisable feminist tradition, being no platformed. And I thought, I'm sorry, unless you've got like two heads and a green, then I don't see in what universe Julie Bindel is the wrong sort of feminist.
I mean, maybe students have always done this, and maybe the only difference is that non-students are now listening more intently to students because of social media. But yes. Do you take some of this on board? Do you feel embarrassed with what, the Liberals have done with the policing, if you like, of who's allowed to say what?
No, I also think that I agree with what Helen's saying about the complexity. I think that we also are in this world with a huge kind of digital presence that people haven't understood, this cacophony. And as I actually point out in the book, if you are living with that cacophony, to try and shut out some of those noises may make some sense. I don't think it's the way to go, but I definitely don't think it's to blame. As I say, I think it's a symptom of
I mean, it's kind of crazy to suggest you'd want to go back to an era where politically correct language wasn't used and you had vile words to describe disabled people or gay people or women.
I mean, I get to swing the gay one here. I mean, I grew up in the 80s when AIDS was a thing and when I was coming out. And I remember growing up in conservative state of Queensland in Australia, and my conservative Christian friends used to tell me that AIDS was the plumber's friend of God. Pump, pump, pump. So, but the other thing is,
it didn't say so. What was your response then? You said
it didn't
fine.
One of the things I made a decision then, and I have stuck to it all my life, is that if you cannot handle nasty language, then public life is not for you.
So it's a suck it up approach.
And that was a decision that I made then, and growing up in Bjelke-Petersen's Queensland, the most socially conservative state in Australia. They handle snakes there, and I just had to learn to deal with it.
I think probably all three of us sitting here have learned to deal with it, but I don't think that's the way it should be. One of the things we're trying to do with our party is to try and open it up to a wider variety of people, to more diversity. That means actually trying to create a culture in which people, women, do not have to fear going out into the public eye and do not get called names. But that's not the same as shying away from truth-telling.
Great to have you both here. I'm just sorry we've run out of time, but that's all we do have time for this evening. Kirsty is with you tomorrow with those results from the by-elections as well. From all of us here, good night.
Good evening.